Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking Wolves YouTube channel. Another episode from me, Gully, looking at now the window has been completed. A bit of squad planning again. You will remember that earlier on in the window, I had a look at where Wolves' gaps were within the squad and what we might look to do within the transfer window. We can now obviously analyse a little bit where we've landed by the end of it, and it's fair to say we've been on a little bit of a journey. There was a whole plan based around the way we set up in pre-season tactically. Gary O'Neill has intimated that things have had to change slightly throughout, whether it be through an absence of suitable targets in certain positions and the ones that they've actually managed to bring in. So I'm going to talk a little bit through where we were, what's happened in between in terms of the games played and where we've landed, and what we can look to expect going forward. But just to give you a little bit of a reminder, this was the squad depth chart that I shared with the first video that I recorded. Very much a team that was lacking a little bit in quality in certain areas. Obviously, at this point, Kilman had gone. I'd already envisaged the Neto departure. But we scope to improve, and the natural squad depth that needed to be added to the team has subsequently been done. There are players in there that obviously have moved on, the likes of Chiquinho, Chirewa, and Boubacar Traore isn't necessarily going to be around for injury reasons, and Sam Johnson has come in as a new goalkeeper. But just to touch on the incomings and the outgoings that we've had since then, you'll see obviously the likes of Rodrigo Gomez, Strand Larson, Lima, Johnston, Bastien Mepiu, who I've included as a first team player as I look to look forward to the rest of this season. Andre, who appears to have been kind of the marquee signing from this window, done late, and also Carlos Forbes as a forward option. And then on the other hand, some of the departures there listed as well. So just to kind of talk, I think, a little bit about the start of this season performance wise and why we've ended up where we have. I think it's key to understand how the games have gone so far, and really kind of look at it in a kind of holistic way as well. That we can't necessarily apply thinking from individual games and say this is what has caused this. I do think it's a bit naive to do that, but I also have my concerns about some of the decision making that we've made. You'll know that in a previous video, I have talked about the shape that we were looking to set up in possession, out of possession. I'm going to set us up here in my tactics board to kind of evidence what I mean by that. And it was a bit of a 4-2-3-1 shape. We had the extra forward in there, and essentially we ended up with the left winger coming in, who's obviously Mateus. The left winger holding the width starting at the start of this season, the right winger coming in and performing a box midfield, left back tucking in a little bit, and the right back providing the width in on the right hand side. So you end up with this back three shape, two sitting midfielders to help develop play, and the width provided by the left winger and the right back. And if we look through some of those scenarios at the start of this season, we can see negatives and positives to do with that. I'm going to highlight basically that shape in this first game here. You can see, whilst ordinarily it might be Ryan Nuri that tucks in as the third centre half, often Mario Lemina becomes that guy from what I've seen so far this season, and essentially they're in a bit of a almost swapping positions at certain times. So you can see Ryan Nuri here sitting in central midfield, Mario Lemina in the left back spot. Obviously, this was against Arsenal, a period in the game that we dominated. We really looked comfortable within this shape and started to make headway towards Arsenal's goal. But unfortunately, we were unable to capitalise on our good spell and lost the game. But then thinking about transition, and this obviously leads on to the Chelsea game as well. You can see here again, I've circled Ryan Nuri because at this point he'd gone on a jaunt upfield. And then it was obviously Mario Lemina's job to then sit in and cover for him. this situation actually ended up with a bit of a half chance for Arsenal. But in terms of shape, in terms of what the players have been asked to do, they were always the numbers were there, and the players that were responsible for that, in theory, were doing their job. Moving on to the Chelsea game, and I think it's really important to analyse the 3 goals that we obviously conceded from the same area of the pitch. And Ryan O'Nuri has gotten pelters ever since this fixture, and Gary O'Neill has raised concerns off the back of it as well. But if we actually have a look at the first goal, it's an unfortunate one in the sense that it was a quickly taken free kick from a position that wasn't obviously where the foul was given. But I think, again, talking about that Lamina Ait-Nouri access, you could see Cole Palmer was looking to find space outside of the central midfield of us, and eventually obviously picked up the ball there and fed it into Noni Madueke. But in essence, I don't think this was necessarily a structural problem. The problem that we had often was that because Palmer's in that position there, he's able to carry the ball forward, draw the attention of Ait-Nouri a little bit, and then obviously feed the ball into Madueke when he's in the penalty area. And by that point, it's difficult to get too close to him, too tight. You're at risk of giving a foul away. And Ait-Nouri is really unfortunate with the goal on this one, I think. Big deflection. He'd essentially done his job by blocking the ball. I think it's not necessarily his forte. I do think there's a bit of an art to blocking shots and things like that. And he hasn't necessarily got the abilities of someone like, say, Craig Dawson. I think Mascara is pretty good at it as well. But again, the problem lies because if Lamina is 5 yards closer to Cole Palmer, then even if he gets the ball, Madueke has to hold more width and isn't able to attack Ait-Nouri in the penalty area as opposed to out on the touchline. And that happened kind of on a few occasions throughout the game. Goal number 2. This was a strange one because this first screen grab that I've got is actually Ait-Nouri mopping up in midfield and feeding the ball back to Jose Sarr. The problem being, Sarr clears the ball. Levi Colwell, I think it was, heads it back into the middle of the park, and Ait-Nouri hasn't necessarily recovered his position, and Lamina, you can see in the second screen grab, is stood next to him as well. So neither of them have kind of done the job of the other, as they kind of tended to be asked to do, as has been shown in early on in this season. And then you end up in a 2-on-1 against Totti, and it was obviously finished off by Madueke on that situation again. Leaves us at 4-2, and this one is really strange, I think. There are obvious issues with the way we trying to play out here. Doherty playing the ball into João Gomez under pressure. I mean, João Gomez doesn't help himself in terms of trying to turn away from trouble and losing the ball, but Ryan Ait-Nouri's positioning on this occasion is just totally bizarre to me. He's not in a position to receive the ball if we try and play out to the left-hand side, and he's not really paying attention or enough attention to Madueke as he's standing the wrong side of him in terms of being goal side. At this point, I think you're talking about a bit of a head loss, and it's clearly, the game had run away from us a little bit, and players just weren't making good decisions at this point, trying to chase and thinking about recovering goals. I think part of this was due to the fact that Chelsea had been so open in the first half as well. We had a lot of joy going forward, and they thought that there was a recoverable situation in terms of finding another goal in quick reply. But at the same time, you just have to settle down to a certain extent and manage the game, and not obviously concede that 5th goal, which really was an absolute killer. Then we move on to having obviously played the Burnley game with a very much changed 11, which had lots of the hallmarks of what we'd done in pre-season, which I haven't necessarily got too much evidence of. Unable to get the full highlights package that Wolves provide on the website. But we move on to Forest, and again, a very similar setup. But in terms of profile, we've changed slightly. We've obviously brought in Craig Dawson, shifted Totti out to the left, and pushed Ryan Ait-Nouri further on. He again was holding the width, but pretty standard 3-2 build-up shape again with Lamina and João Gomez. I think there was a lot of talk and narrative about we're moving back to the back 3, but it was very clear that Ryan Atner is playing as a left winger as opposed to a wing back like he had done last season. If you look at the average positions on who scored, I have got them, but I haven't got them to hand right now. Ryan Atner's touches leave him as the highest player on the pitch for Wolves. So it's still very much a back four, I think. One thing I did want to highlight was the return of Nelson Semedo, which I think helps us in terms of transition defending. There's this scenario early on in the game. We've been caught up a little bit defending the wrong side of the halfway line and allowed Hudson-Odoi to get a run on us. He actually ran offside, but a cleverer run actually helps, actually breaks us down here. But Semedo, having been behind Hudson-Odoi, actually recovers his position with his pace and gets in ahead of him and stops the attack despite it being offside. I think his return is really, really helpful in terms of helping us defend higher up the pitch because he has that recovery pace. He reads the game brilliantly as well. And I thought he had an excellent game considering it was his first one back against Forest. One thing I did notice is that he wasn't being tasked with playing really high up the pitch in that one, maybe because he hasn't necessarily got the match fitness that he needs at this moment in time, and he did obviously come off with a bit of cramp, but it was a bit more just of a conservative approach from O'Neill. I think it was just about getting a point on the board. Now, going back to kind of incomings and where the squad is left in terms of its depth and what kind of options we have available to us now. This is the state of play. And it's an interesting situation. There are obviously players here who I hadn't envisaged being a part of the equation, players like Gonzalo Gedge. Pedence obviously left. But in terms of how we attack the rest of the season, the Andre signing is obviously the one that provides a little bit more of a question mark. As I've spoken about, I think we probably envisaged having an extra forward on the pitch at the start of the season, and we built towards that in pre-season. The arrival of Andre basically provides us with another certain starter in midfield. That's the way I feel about it. Once he beds in and gets comfortable with how he wants to play. So it suggests to me that we're going to shift to a midfield three, which obviously takes away from our forward line, and we have lots of options there. I do personally see Cunha and Strand Larsen taking the majority of the minutes in two of those slots, which leaves one for the likes of Hwang, Sarabia, Forbes, Gedge, all to fight for. Rodrigo Gomez as well, and even Aït-Nouri, obviously, as he played hard at the pitch against Forest. So it's an interesting scenario for O'Neill to have to contend with now. Obviously, it could change depending on the opposition. But I personally believe that Ryan Aït-Nouri will continue to play at left back in this system. I think Gary O'Neill really wants to find a way to involve him in the team. He loves his abilities, he loves his talent, and he loves the way that he can be a facilitator for winning matches for us. Not necessarily in terms of getting goals and things like that, but his natural talent, obviously developing play, being press resistant, being able to break the game for us a little bit. Gary O'Neill loves that, and he loves, I think, the axis of Cunha and Aït-Nouri playing really close together, which he tried to do at Forest to different degrees of success. Obviously, Aït-Nouri had that chance 1v1 in the first couple of minutes. But if I go to kind of if we think about introducing Andre into the team and what that looks like, I think if I go back to my tactics board again, this is how we can see us setting up. I do think this is more of a profile thing as opposed to a structure thing, and perhaps Mario Lemina and João Gomes aren't of the discipline to really play a proper number 6 defensive midfielder role. But in possession, I still expect us to do very similar things. Now, if I think about the fact that Ryan Aït-Nouri is still playing at left back, you push him forward, you perhaps push Nelson Semedo forward a little bit, and then you get, like Mario Lemina did at times in the season, you get the likes of Andre dropping in perhaps to the left, sometimes dependent on where the ball is, in the middle. And then you've got two midfielders here in Gomez and Lemina, who are likely to play a game. does it suit them? Perhaps not. But I think the idea of them pressing from a higher position is a good prospect because they are so good at getting on the front foot and at opposition players. But then you've got, like I say, the likes of Cunha tucking in, and I think you're looking at a more narrow forward line in general with this shape. So you've got that kind of box midfield again. So it's quite similar, and it gives the wider fullbacks the license to go forward a little bit. So almost you're looking at the same shape that we would have done previously, just in a different format with different players and different profiles. It remains to be seen how we set up, obviously, but I think O'Neill has acknowledged perhaps that profile of player isn't quite suiting the way the team is setting up. I don't think that necessarily means a lot for the shape. I just think he prefers someone like Andre, who has been used to being the first face receiver in Fluminense and quite a disciplined player by all accounts. I don't know a fat lot about him, but all the things I've read about him is that he's happy playing in that role, doesn't necessarily need to be too involved going forward. Fluminense are an interesting case because of their management style. Fernando Diniz, who I think has moved on to be the Brazil manager now, but the way they set up was very kind of close. People called it relationism, which is very much all about playing tight, playing short passes, and moving as a team with the ball, as opposed to setting up in strict positions and moving the ball into kind of set places as you do with kind of the positional play that has kind of dominated football. But ultimately, he's a player used to playing under pressure, used to having lots of the ball, has a better passing range from what I've seen than Lamina and Gomez, and is able to pick better passes, but also has that discipline to cover space when one of his teammates has perhaps gone forward and left it a little bit open. Someone like Aït-Nouri is liable to do that. Why? While he obviously offers his risks as a player, the upside of him being involved further up the pitch and maintaining an extra forward as well, which I think is really important, is really useful. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this pans out. I was a little bit concerned, I think, in terms of O'Neill's reaction to the Chelsea game, the suggestion that we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. But I do still think structurally we'll be quite similar. It's just different players doing different jobs. So let's see how it pans out against Newcastle in our next game. Something that I think we should be targeting as a game to win. I'm not ever overly impressed by Newcastle. I think they're a very physical side and make things difficult for teams, but they're there to be got at as well. And we'll see how we line up. See if a lot of our South American players, obviously, who've been away, will be struggling perhaps with the time difference and coming back to start on that Sunday. But I do think we'll see a relatively similar shape. So those envisaging a back five, back three, sorry to say, is probably not going to happen if that's what you prefer. But lots of things to be interested and curious about going forward. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop any comments. We can have a chat about what you think about this going forward, guys. See you soon.